Hello, I'd like to welcome everyone to the webinar today, March 26th, Implementing a Comprehensive Instructional Effectiveness Assessment System, hosted by Assessment Technology Incorporated and presented by Jason Feld, Vice President of Corporate Projects, and facilitated by myself, Jody Jepson. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule today to join us. Before we begin the presentation, I'd like to go over some general housekeeping items. The webinar is being recorded today and will be provided to attendees after the presentation. We would also like to encourage interaction through comments and questions. The structure of the webinar will provide for designated question and answer breaks. Let's take a moment to walk through how to set up your audio and how to submit some questions. You may have seen a window pop up prompting you to join the integrated audio conference. If you closed that window or did not click OK, scroll to the top of your screen. A drop-down menu will happen and an icon with headphones. Click that and you will now initiate the audio portion of the webinar. If you would like to submit questions, use the Q&A function of WebEx. On the menu, click the Q&A icon box and the drop-down panel will open up. Make sure that you send all your questions to all panelists right here in this area. Use the Ask field to select all panelists if it's not showing. Go back to the Q&A menu box at the top, click the down arrow if you were not able to collect the Q&A icon box. This will now enable your questions. For those of you who have just joined us today, we welcome you to the Implementing a Comprehensive Instructional Effectiveness Assessment System webinar today, March 26th, hosted by Assessment Technology Incorporated. If you are experiencing any technical difficulty, please call the WebEx support number directly at 866-569-3239. As a reminder, the webinar is being recorded today and will be provided to you after the presentation. I see a lot of folks have already joined us and it's time to begin our webinar. Please allow me to introduce Dr. Jason Feld with Assessment Technology Incorporated.
Thanks, Jody, and welcome everyone to our webinar. As many of you already know, we've been working with a number of school districts over the past 2 years to address some of the new challenges associated with educator effectiveness legislation. That being said, the focus of today's webinar is to highlight some of these challenges and to discuss the ways in which Galileo is being used to address them. Overall, our goal is to provide you with information that will hopefully help you to empower teachers as educators, principals as leaders, and students as learners. So let's begin. Generally speaking, these challenges fall into 4 different categories. With regard to context challenges, we now know that educator evaluation has become more formalized, that school district initiatives are now subject to greater scrutiny both internally and by state departments of education, and that districts do now need to follow the guidelines provided in educator effectiveness frameworks, which are published by state departments of education. When it comes to content challenges, a stronger emphasis is now being placed on the relationship between the in-task Model Core teaching standards, the ISLIC educational leadership policy standards, and the new Common Core state standards. Moreover, there's an increased focus on what teachers should know and what they should be able to do to ensure that students are college or career ready. Finally, complexity challenges come in the form of some key questions requiring action on the part of school districts. These include, how do we effectively link educator performance to student learning outcomes? How do we weight and compile multiple data sources for different educators to produce an overall proficiency score? How do we ensure that student performance data is reliable, valid, and most importantly, useful for measuring growth? Similarly, how do we ensure that teacher performance data is also reliable, valid, and useful for guiding professional development and practice? And finally, how do we obtain actionable data throughout the year to inform decision making? Today's webinar will focus on these challenges, and we're going to do it by illustrating a few of the tools in Galileo that will help us along the way. The first, as an example, will be a discussion about reliable and valid educator rating scales that, as I mentioned earlier, are aligned to the INTAX standards. We're going to show you a quick preview right now of what a rating scale would look like in Galileo, and we'll be coming back to this a little bit later to go over it in more details. The second is reliable and valid measures of student progress in state-tested subject areas. These would typically include math, English language arts, writing, and again we're going to show you an example here of an instructional effectiveness pretest. I just want to spend a few minutes pointing out what you're looking at here because this will come up again in our presentation. You're looking at the standards for a pretest in third grade math for instructional effectiveness, and you're looking at 3 columns labeled discrimination, difficulty, and guessing. Those are item parameters that we generate using item response theory techniques, and you'll be hearing a lot more about that as we go through the assessment tools for students and the rating scales for teachers. You'll also note at the bottom of this particular report in Galileo, this particular scale has been administered to 800 students, and has a pretty good reliability of 0.87. The third focus we'll have here today are the non-state tested subjects. These include all the other subjects that are not measured by the state test, anywhere from physical education to visual arts to welding to French to Spanish. And again, we'll just show you a quick look at what a pretest will look like here. And again, just like the state test, we are assigning item parameters to them using item response theory as well as a reliability coefficient. Finally, we're going to walk you through an evaluation score compiler within Galileo. This compiler is designed to not only weight but also combine educator effectiveness indicators into one single score for reporting. And as we did previously, we'll just give you a quick look at this so you kind of get a feel for it. And again, we'll be going into this in much more detail as we go through this webinar. When it comes to developing and actually reporting out information for educator effectiveness, what we've done to support districts is to develop something that's quite flexible, it's online, and it allows a district to do a number of different things. First, it allows a district to designate the data source categories to be included in educator performance ratings. It will, of course, accommodate any number of data sources within each category that a district has identified. It'll help the district to differentially weight the data in each of these categories, set cut points, and of course, in the end, compute an evaluation score, not simply at the end of the year, but throughout the year, so that information is available to use in guiding professional development and decision-making activities. We're going to walk you through what the compiler looks like, and I just want to familiarize you first with the dashboard. We'll be going through a number of these widgets. The one we're focused on right now is the evaluation score compiler summary, and the first thing we're going to do is go ahead and configure the score compiler. We can then also identify the different evaluation categories. What you're looking at here are some categories related to student performance, another one related to staff rating, and you'll also know the weighting is there as well. We can add a new category if we choose to do so. A lot of districts are interested in adding climate surveys, so we'll just go ahead and put that one in for you now, and we'll assign a particular weight to that one. Once we assign the weight to it, you'll also notice that the total percent that's accommodated for by all these categories will change. If we need to adjust it, we'll go ahead and do that as well, and we'll just save it. And then finally, we'll assign staff. What we are learning from districts is that different templates with different categories, with in fact different weights, are needed to address ratings related to full-time teachers, to resource teachers, and all different types of staff. This is the area in Galileo where we can actually assign a particular template to a particular group of staff. We would go ahead and save it, and then we're pretty much ready to go in terms of using the compiler. What I also want to show you now is what that compiler looks like once we're actually producing information on all these different categories. And again, you saw this earlier. at the beginning of the presentation, but I want to spend a couple of minutes going over now. You'll notice on the upper right-hand side, the district's identified that 50% of the overall rating will be accounted for by school student performance, another 50% by staff rating, and of course if we put in another category like climate surveys, then that would modify the pie chart for you. We're looking at a particular teacher right now. You can see all the categories under student performance, school level data, and staff rating information. You'll also notice that the weights assigned to each of those categories are immediately to the right of those categories. And of course the most important piece here is we've taken data from different types of categories and basically placed it on a common scale of scores, those you see ranging from about 2.02 to 3.0, and by doing that we're able to automatically generate a final evaluation score. For this particular teacher it's 2.42, so Caleb should be quite pleased because he's been identified as an effective teacher. In addition to building a good scale, we also are very concerned about ensuring that the teacher rating scales are reliable and valid. We're going to walk you through the item banking technology now that we use with districts to actually put educator effectiveness tools right into Galileo. And basically there are a couple of things the district can do. They can certainly construct their own locally customized rating scale that's aligned with the INTASC or ILSIC standards. If they've already developed a teacher performance or rating scale, we can actually put that into Galileo for them, and that makes it possible for them to modify it over time. If there's a third-party tool that's already in use, we again can work with the district to embed that in Galileo so long as the district has copyright permission to do so. And there's a fourth option, and that has to do with simply importing data from scales that are administered outside of Galileo and get it right into the system. One good reason for getting all that data into Galileo, among many, is that we can then help the district to identify those performance criteria that are truly aligned with the Common Core State Standards. As I mentioned earlier in the webinar, it's not simply a matter of looking at professional development, but those professional development standards and indicators that are really going to be best aligned with the Common Core State Standards requirements. Once that's in there, the district is then in a great position to make changes in the standards and in the assessment requirements over time. The other reason for getting stuff into one system is that once it's sitting in Galileo, we can then use the system to schedule teacher and administrator observations. The security features are already in place. The data entry and analysis features are in place. And of course, as always within Galileo, the reporting capabilities will function automatically for the school district. We're going to take you through a quick walk through the item banking technology in Galileo. And again, you'll note that we're right back to the major dashboard, so everything that happens within the system for educator effectiveness happens right here. We're going to go ahead and give you a walkthrough on how to build a proficiency scale. All we're doing here is basically putting it into a district's library called Demo. We're going to put a title on it. And any instructions for the observer will go right here on the front page of this tool. We'll go ahead and save it for you. And we're going to jump down to the INTASC Professional Teaching Standards, which are already in Galileo. We'll select Standard 1, Learner Development. And just for this webinar, we'll select all those standards for consideration. Once we do that, the system allows us to actually go into the database and find questions that can be used to help guide observation for each of these standards. And as you can see, we have the subject, teaching standards, the standard, one of the objectives within those standards, and then an example of an item that can be used. Now on this particular display we're simply showing evident and not evident, but a district is free to put any number of proficiency levels in that they choose to do so. Again, the point being we want to make sure that the technology is responsive to the local school district's needs, can be customized as needed, and can in fact be used in a way that's consistent with what the district is trying to accomplish. Here we are going to go ahead and add some questions to the test. You can see they're here right now. We can move them up, down, and all around the place, if you will. And of course, at the end of the day, we simply click on Publish, and as soon as we do that, that performance rating scale is now available for use within the system. In terms of giving you an ease of use view of these scales, I want to talk about a few things as well. The first thing that we want to note to you is that once it's in the system, we can in fact deliver it through a computer, a tablet, or a smartphone. And what that will do will give the observer easy access to the standards that are being observed, the rubrics associated with those, the data sources for documenting the ratings, any anecdotal notes and calendar information, and finally integration with whatever additional portfolio or supportive materials are in place. We're going to go ahead and show you a detailed look at what those scales look like when they're administered. Again, we're right back to the dashboard that we started from, and instead of building the scale now, we're going to simply click on Administer the Scale. We're going to select a staff member. We're going to go into a scale that has been developed, and I do want to note here, you'll notice that the rating scale we're using is from Scottsdale Unified School District. We've been working with Scottsdale. They're a great partner in this, in helping to build out and support their system. So you are in fact looking at the current tool that we've built in for use over at Scottsdale. And again, I thank them very much for allowing us to share this with the group today. You'll notice the standard, teacher expectations. We can simply click on the box here and it will open up the details of the standard as well as the indicators that have been selected. Scottsdale's identified 4 proficiency levels. We also have in here a place for the observer to record notes. We also have a place for them to quickly document the evidence that supports their decision. And to make life a bit more easier for the observer, we also put the scoring rubric that's developed for each of these standards directly in the hands of the user with simply a click. And you'll notice we put it in 2 separate windows so that one does not have to remove a window in order to look at another one. The last piece I want to share with you in this section has to do with the reliability and validity of the rating scales. We know, of course, it's extremely important to have inter-rater reliability when one is doing teacher observations, but of equal, if not more importance, is to assure that the scales themselves are, in fact, reliable and valid. We do that in a similar fashion as to the way we generate reliability and validity for all the student assessments, which is using an item response theory and IRT model. It helps us to validate the scales for the district and produce a proficiency scale score. The nice thing about IRT is that it gives us a continuous interval scale score, which allows the district to actually measure changes over time. That's something that cannot be done when you're dealing simply with raw data, or you're looking at different items that are on your scale on 2 different observations. So IRT plays a really big role here in actually giving the districts a continuous score and one that is in fact defensible. It also helps the district to have some very high measurement precision because we're generating item difficulty and discrimination information for the indicators as well as reliability, and it gives the district an easy way to create meaningful proficiency levels. We're going to go ahead and pull up for you an IRT analysis on actually the proficiency scale that we've been working on with Scottsdale. You can see this has been administered to over 1,300 teachers. It has a great reliability of 0.82, and you'll note that for all the indicators and that are included on this scale, we've been able to generate discrimination and difficulty parameters. So not only do they have that additional level of information, but it will also help them now to make decisions about changes in those scales as they go forward. I'm going to go ahead and take a breath if I can right now, let you think about what we've just shared with you, and open it up a couple of minutes for some questions. So I'll wait a few seconds and see what comes in. So go ahead out there in webinar land and type away. Okay, first question has come in. I'll go ahead and try to address that one for everybody. It reads, can a district set different weightings for staff? And they're saying, for example, teachers of state-tested content versus non-state tested content. As you may recall, because I know stuff goes by pretty quickly in a webinar, a district can, in fact, set different weightings for any and all of the categories that are of interest to them when they are putting their educator scales in Galileo. And each of those can be built in a separate template. There can be one for resource teachers. There can be one for full-time teachers. It's really up to the district. The goal here is to make the system as flexible as possible so that districts have a large measure of control over it. And once that's done, then you're ready to go. Next question that came in is, can we incorporate other scores into the system? And they said, can we put school performance scores in or surveys into the weighting? Again, the answer to that is, well, yes, of course you can. Whatever categories you want to add into the system, whatever weights you want to assign to them, you can certainly do that to the interface that we shared with you earlier. One nice thing that also allows you to do is kind of do a test run. You could put weights in and you can put categories in and actually do some research locally to see what types of outcomes you get in terms of overall effectiveness when you look at different weights and different categories. Some districts like to do that because they may have implemented, for example, a new intervention program in the area of math that they want to weight more heavily. They may have done some additional professional development for teachers and some types of classroom management skills, and they may want to look to see how those weights, changing those weights impact. Last question that came in just now to me that was sent over is, our new teachers will require more observations throughout the year than an experienced teacher. Can we monitor, can we monitor the groups separately? Yes, you can. Again, within the dashboard, you can actually set up different plates with different requirements for different groups of teachers. The number of observations that you care to do during a school year for any set of teachers is really totally up to you. What we're doing is providing you with a pretty easy interface so that you can see a calendar for those observations, you can have a history of those observations, and then throughout the year you can actually generate an ongoing effectiveness score so that, as we say oftentimes, you don't have to wait until the horse is out of the barn at the end of the year to actually do good things to make things work better within your school district. I see there are a bunch of other questions that came in. If it's all right with all of you out there, I'm just going to hold off on those so we can continue with the second part of the webinar, but we will be going and reviewing them and getting information out to everybody a couple of days after the end of the webinar. So we'll go ahead and proceed now. We talked, as you now recall, about the side of the system that deals with gathering information on teachers, and of course we're not going over principal tools here, but you should know that of course that can be done within the system as well. Now we're going to switch gears and talk a little bit about the other side of educator effectiveness, which has to do with data on students. We know, as I'm sure you all do as well, that generally there are two types of student assessment that would be included in an instructional effectiveness initiative. One would be student data related to areas and grades on the statewide test. Again, typically that could be English language arts, writing, and science. And of course those that are not addressed on the statewide test, PE, woodworking, visual arts, drama, you name it. In order to accommodate that need, the approach that we took was to first of all build pre- and post-instructional effectiveness assessments for all the state tested areas. They've actually been implemented in over 100 school districts this year in a number of different states as part of the piling we began 2 years ago. These are at this point highly reliable. And they are in a pair. They cover grades K through 12, and as I said earlier, are being implemented by districts in the area of math, English language arts, science, and writing. All of these pre-post assessments have IRT, item parameters, associated with them. And as you may recall earlier, that includes item difficulty, discrimination, and in those instances where we have multiple choice items, a guessing parameter. And we're looking to make sure that the items on there best support documenting student growth. In addition to that, these pre and post tests are comprehensive in that they're covering the standards for a grade level in as much breadth and depth as possible, and that is important because we want to make sure that as districts transition over to Common Core, the tools that they're using to measure student learning are in fact as closely aligned as possible with the tools that will be used to measure student learning as the statewide tests come out for Common Core. As you probably have already figured out, with IRT, we can place the pre and post test on a common scale, which truly allows the district to look at progress. But in addition to that, they can also now be used to inform instruction and forecast performance on the statewide test. The second piece of that are the customized benchmark assessments that are also used by many districts as part of an IE initiative. Those are not pre-developed by us here at ATI. Those are actually assessments that are built with us in partnership with the school districts and aligned to the Common Core state standards. They tend to be built so that they represent the pacing guides in the districts, and they are sequenced according to the district's curriculum. Similar to the pre-post test, they are used to track progress continuously, to inform instruction, just like the IE assessments, and to forecast performance on the statewide test. We're going to show you a quick look at how that interface works with school districts. You're in Galileo again, as you were before. We're simply going to Common Core state standards for the 5th grade. All the standards for Common Core now show up on the district's view. They're simply selecting the standards they want to use for their interim benchmarks. They're letting us know the number of items they wish to include. And as they do that, on the right side of your screen, that information appears, so they're getting real-time feedback in terms of what they're doing. And you'll also note, because it's not sufficient simply to provide instruments to districts, but also to make sure that what happens according with the district's schedule for implementation, there's a little task sheet here that allows the district to work with us so that we know when the assessment's going to be completed, when it's going to be reviewed by the district, and districts typically have a 2-tiered reviewed on these assessments, and then when the final assessment will be delivered. In addition to the state-tested areas, we also have to accommodate the vast majority of teachers that are in non-state tested areas. In order to do this, we developed what we call a community assessment and item banking initiative. I'll tell you a little bit about that initiative and then give you some examples of that. What this initiative does is it allows the districts, really in many cases for the first time, to become highly proficient in developing high-quality items and assessments, but not just by themselves, but as part of a continuing growing community and a continuing growing item bank of shared items that are built to a very high level of standards. And in the bank right now, for example, districts can access PE standards, art, music, foreign languages, finance, social studies, just to name a few. I think the last time I looked, there were probably a little over 7,500 items in that bank. Congratulations to all the districts out there that are part of this initiative. They've done a very good job in a very short period of time, and we're looking forward to seeing that item bank grow over the years to come. Fundamentally, what we're doing is giving the districts access to the item banking technology that we use here to develop items. We're helping them to establish their item development goals, to develop really the most important part of creating an item specification, and then to support their development of selected response, constructed response, and SE items. We want to ensure that they have a wide range of items to use. We're working with them to review and certify them, identifying the DOK levels on them. And once these are administered, just like any other tool within Galileo, we apply IRT analysis so that a district does in fact have valid item parameters and knows that their instrument has good reliability. We're going to go ahead and quickly throw up for you just one of the many CAIB assessments that have been developed through this community effort across states. This one is pretty basic. It has to do with PE. While you're looking at a hard copy, the district is administering this with plain paper and high-speed scanning, response pad technology, and of course online. Each of these, as you might figure out, is attached internally within Galileo to a standard, so that when reports come out for this type of a non-state tested area, we are still engaged in reporting to teachers for their use student mastery of standards. This part of the Educator Effective Initiative becomes really, really important because within within the Common Core transition, it's no longer sufficient simply to focus on the state-tested areas, but we have to really focus on multidisciplinary instruction as well as assessments. So building out these type of assessments with the districts really helps them to get closer to achieving their goals in that direction. Now that we've talked about assessments that are built for observing teachers and leaders, and assessments that are built for gathering information on students, I want to talk a little bit about how we actually measure growth within the system. We know from working with districts that some of them are looking for a more normative approach to measuring growth, while others prefer not to use comparisons. In order to accommodate that, we've developed two approaches: one, a value-added approach, and a non-normative approach called categorical growth. In the value-added approach, each teacher, as I'm sure most of you out there know, is being compared to other teachers in the school and the district based on student growth between 2 points in time. In the case of Galileo, it would be a pre and a post test. In the case of statewide assessments, well, you have that information that we put into Galileo as well. And in the categorical growth analysis, data on whether a teachers have maintained expected growth is really based on the use of repeated measures t-test, where we're looking fundamentally at the difference between observed and expected growth. Now, we're going to show you some tools in Galileo that actually make this happen. We're not going to spend time today on value-added modeling. We can actually do a whole webinar on that, but since we do have limited time, we are going to show you a little more detail on categorical growth. But again, just to remind you, all that information is on the dashboard, and the categorical growth report, which is a drill down, and the value-added report, which is also a drill down, just like any of the other reports on the dashboard, are right there for the end user. We're going to go ahead and drill a little deeper and actually show you a CGA report. We're in a demonstration school here. We're going to go ahead math, and we'll get our favorite teacher, Khalib, here. We're selecting basically a pre-test and a post-test, and as soon as we do that, the data on this categorical growth report appears, and I'm going to spend a minute or so kind of walking you through this. The best way to probably explain this to you is to have you focus on the upper right quadrant where it says higher achievement, higher growth. Basically, the students, and each of those dots, by the way, is a student. The students in this scatter plot quadrant are categorized as having high achievement and high growth, which basically means that the students scored above the proficiency cut score, which you see outlined here, okay, on the end test, and also demonstrated greater than expected growth between the two tests. And here you see the proficiency, the expected growth line, which is that red line going up and down. If we hover over any of these, you can see the student name, their growth, and their end test IRT score, which in our system we call a developmental level score, but nonetheless it is like all these mastery scores for students and for educators, an IRT score. And if we simply click on the higher achievement, higher growth box, it will show us exactly who those students are. So it makes it pretty easy for a teacher to see at the class level, and obviously for building principal to see the school level, exactly where the students are and whether or not they are achieving expected growth. You'll notice on this report we indicate that in fact expected growth is exceeded for the group and that the change is statistically significant. Okay, at this point I am going to take another breath, if you all don't mind, and stop for a moment and see if you've got some questions that we can hopefully answer for you. Again, I'll try to get to 3 of them at this point, and anything else that I've not been able to answer, we will get that back to you. So I'll wait a moment or two and see what comes in across the airwaves. Okay, got one here. The question is as follows. Can we use existing benchmark assessments or teacher-constructed assessments for measuring student progress? The answer to that is yes and yes, but I want to explain that to you. Typically, in a very systemic approach to educator effectiveness initiatives, a district is recognizing that they're simply not collecting data to evaluate a teacher or a school leader. The real purpose in gathering data is to do something, to take an action. The action can be to identify the kind of professional development that's needed. It could be action related to what needs to be changed in the classroom to move students from higher levels of risk and not meeting Common Core state standards to lower levels of risk. And if we conceptualize an educator effective initiative is really, as I said earlier, helping teachers to do a better job at what they do and helping students to do a better job at what they do, then data becomes really, really important. So yes, in fact, you can use existing benchmark assessments to follow the progress of the students over the course of the school year, to look at a categorical growth analysis, to look at evaluated analysis. That information is very, very important to help guide instruction. And as I said earlier, we can also use that to predict performance on the high-stakes tests. Currently now we're predicting performance on the state tests. Once the PARCC and Smarter Balance assessments come out and are used by the state, we will gather that data as well, run correlations with districts that are implementing Galileo, and provide that predictive data as well. Oh, and by the way, along with that, forecasting accuracy reports, because we do want to make sure that not only is the district predicting, but there is a high level of accuracy in forecasting those predictions. And of course, on the teacher-constructed assessment side, which was the latter part of that question, that's the whole purpose in having the community assessment and item banking initiative. We like, and apparently we're hearing that the districts like, to want to get more engaged in actually building out and sharing content as a learning community, not only within a district, but across districts, and not only across districts within a state, but across districts in multiple states. It's kind of like they say to us all the time, we're all in it together. Why don't we try to build a bridge together and get to where we want to go? So we kind of like that idea, and we're going to support that as much as we can. The next question that came in is which measures of student progress are recommended for non-state tested subjects? Again, a district really at the end of the day has to, as a community, make its decisions regarding what measures of student progress they're actually going to be using. In some states that we're working with, there's a strong push to have teachers that are in non-state tested areas develop and use reliable and valid tools to measure student growth in those non-state tested areas. That's one of the reasons why we've initiated this community item banking initiative a while back. In some instances, school districts are looking at using aggregated data in the state tested areas to look at student growth. Really, it depends on what a district wants to do. The score compiler that I showed you earlier and the ability to pretty much bring in any category and set any weight to it is functional regardless of what a district decides to do. We of course like to consult with the districts very carefully so that what they actually see in their version of Galileo is what they want to see once they implement this system locally. Next question that came in is, are the pre-test and the post-test identical, or do they follow the same blueprint? The pre-test and the post-test are not identical, although they are both designed to be comprehensive, as I said earlier, in nature. And the reason we need them to be comprehensive is because we want to get as broad and deep a view of student learning over the course of a school year as we possibly can. So those are designed to do that. The pretest does in fact include standards and items from the prior school year. So if you are a fourth grade student and you're in a classroom where the teacher is administering the pretest, there will be some items and standards that would appear from the third grade. We do that for a number of reasons. Obviously, if you assess students on everything they may not have learned, you're not going to get a whole lot of variation in your data, and as a result, it's not going to be very valuable to you in really getting a good baseline of what the students know, and not really valuable to you in terms of using the data to help guide some instructional decision making, whether it be an enrichment activity or a reteaching activity. So we want to get a real credible baseline, a real starting point for the students in this initiative, and therefore we add some stuff from the prior year. That, by the way, also helps to get the reliability at a level that we're comfortable with, because we're not basically asking the students to tell us what they know about stuff we might not have taught with them yet. The post-test, on the other hand, is designed to cover in a comprehensive way everything that was identified as standards required for students to learn within a school year. We do use, as you probably already know, an IRT model so that we can place the pretest and the post-test on a common scale so that we're not dealing with raw data in terms of looking at growth. We're looking at interval level data. We're able to make a true statement about whether or not growth has been maintained, not maintained, or exceeded. So the blueprints are different, but they're different because they're fulfilling a very specific purpose related to educator effectiveness. I'm going to go ahead and stop now. I'm keeping my eye on the clock. We'll move to kind of a somewhat of a little wrap-up slide here for you. The thing that is really most important to point out is that we're not done, so to speak, and I don't think the school districts out there, regardless of which state you're in and which legislation you're in, trying to implement, whether it be in Massachusetts or Arizona or Colorado or Florida or any of the states that are implementing educational effectiveness initiatives, it is a work in progress, and I think everybody knows that. And in order to support what the districts are doing, and for that matter what the states are trying to do, a couple of things are going to be happening on our end the next couple of months. Generally speaking, we're going to continue to provide professional development as it's needed. We will consult with school districts and agencies that are working with school districts as needed. And for those of you that are already using Galileo, you won't be surprised to know that we will in fact be putting more innovations into the system in order to support districts not only in the upcoming school year, but again in the years ahead as we transition into Common Core and we start to more formally implement educator effectiveness initiatives. And just in a nutshell, what we're going to be doing here is working with districts to implement comprehensive systems within their district. We have a heavy focus on developing and supporting the use of technology and teaching strategies to help districts develop Common Core curricula. Those of you that are joining us today and might have already joined us last month when Scott Cunningham, our Director of Assessment and Content Development, did his webinar. You know, we're formally moving forward with that, and you'll see that in Galileo. Those of you that have not been in that webinar, it is posted on our website, so please, when you have a moment or two, go back and look at it. We've heard a lot from districts having to do with how much testing is enough. What testing do we actually need to do, not only for educator effectiveness initiatives, but just in terms of being able to move forward in Common Core implementation. So our view, and the view of the partners that we work with, is that there needs to be a balanced approach for a district-wide assessment program. We try to build that out with districts we work with within Galileo, but again, that's something that if people would like to talk to us about what it really means to have a balanced approach, we'd be happy to chat with you about that. And finally, and it's kind of the last thing I added on here, it wasn't so much an afterthought, but it was really more of an aha experience with me as we've been going out there and talking to districts across different states. What we're finding is that there are a lot of different definitions as it relates to what an assessment is. What's a formative assessment? What's a benchmark assessment? What's an interim assessment? What's a predictive assessment? What's a diagnostic assessment? We seem to hear these terms out there used in a number of different ways. So what districts have asked us to do, and we're going to do, is also to provide some support and training and consultation in enhancing the assessment literacy, so that in fact as we do move forward with Common Core and educator effectiveness, when the words are spoken and the labels are given for a particular type of assessment and its use, at least most, hopefully all the stakeholders in the district are on the same page, so that communication can be effective and meaningful. That's about it from me. I think I've communicated everything that I would like to communicate with you all today. I will be answering the questions that came in, and there are quite a few of them that came in, so I thank you very, very much for this. I am easily accessible at ATI. If you would like to call and chat, I'm always happy to do that. We're always happy here to make arrangements to visit with your district, to set up the webinars for you. But our goal here is really to be as strong a resource as we can for not only the districts that use Galileo, but also for those districts that are trying to figure out what to do. We're really happy to talk to people, and we welcome the opportunity. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jody, and I know Jody's going to have some closing remarks and I guess rules of the road for you as we move forward.
Thank you, Dr. Feld, for your presentation today. It was very informative. And I do want to thank you for your attendance today and logging on, and there was a lot of good information available. I do want to remind you that the recording of the webinar will be made available to all attendees, as well as it being posted on our website. I do know that we weren't able to get to all of the questions today, and we will be making that available to you as well. We'll be e-blasting that out as well as posting on our website. Dr. Feld mentioned a few summer trainings. I did want to touch base on that. The first summer training stems from Scott Cunningham's webinar that was given in February. This training will focus on instructional dialogue technology and Common Core curricular development. The other option this summer will stem from Dr. Feld's presentation today. It will be focusing on building a local educator effectiveness system. Dates have not been set yet, but they will be made available very soon, and details as well. You can find that on the ATI website. And again, this concludes our presentation, and I thank you very much for your attendance.